And welcome back. Here we are, another week, another set of great performances. We've had a spectacular weekend, including another NCAA record has gone down. What a great year so far. We're having a lot of great performances. And so we're going to kind of stick with our number ones format that we started. And I think that works well. So we'll talk right away about the new NCAA record on the women's side in the women's mile. That goes to Riley Chamberlain of BYU. Can you believe it? BYU? No, no one's shocked here. BYU has quietly built a phenomenal program of distance runners, and it should, not go unnoticed that the time that they ran the distance medley relay early in the season will probably sit as the number one time, at least in my opinion, until it's championship time. But let's focus on Riley Chamberlain's 420.61. We have a new NCAA record. I think that makes us change our predictions in the mile, specifically me. I was really with Sunyin Adaejah, who's having a great indoor season, along with her teammate, Wilma Nielsen. Oregon's got two great distance runners, but Oregon is kind of battling BYU for West Coast dominance and for NCAA dominance overall. And this gives BYU three NCAA leads in distance races. You have the mile, the 5K, excuse me, the 3K, and the DMR. So just hats off to, this insane program. And Riley Chamberlain, 420.61. She ran a fantastic race against really good competition. Wilma Nielsen was on her heels pretty much majority of that race. It was just them two, with great performances. I shouldn't say just those two. It was a collection of athletes with great performances, but those two stood out. And when I initially did my notes for today's recording, it was initially Billa Jipkiru of Oklahoma State. But quickly that changed because of the NCAA record ran by Riley Chamberlain, 420.61. I think, and I said this at the beginning of the year, and I want to remind everyone that I did say this. We were headed for an incredible year in the mile, and so far that has been proven. It may get to the point where the cutoff to join the mile group at NCAAs may be 420, 430. You may have to run 430 or under. And we already have a freshman running 425, Claire Stigall of University of Florida. So it's clear that 420s is the range you need to be at if you want to be considered a threat in the mile. Now, moving on, sticking to the women, we'll go to Adaejah Hodge of Georgia. We talked about her last week, I believe, as the NCAA lead in the 200. She improved her well, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but she improved her 200-meter lead, a time of 22:51. Her first full indoor season as a collegiate athlete. Things are really going well for Georgia. And I feel like we were wowed by what they did at the beginning of the season with all the great marks and all the NCAA leads and their presence on social media, the update to their track and their locker room, and Coach Carol Smith Gilbert is just, doing such a phenomenal job of coaching. I think what kind of got ignored, or what's getting ignored, is their performance on the women's side in the short sprints, because in the 400 we see their depth. We saw what their 4x4 could do. We know what their 4x4 capable of. They have three different 4x4 groups, all under 330. It's the depth is insane. And Kayla Jackson coming back, after I feel like she had too many injuries. Things just didn't seem right last year for her. She was good, but not great. She's having a great indoor season, but kind of getting overshadowed by Adaejah. 22:51 is no slouch time. I know that we shouldn't be surprised she ran a 22:3 in high school, but this is impressive coming off of missing a whole year last year to having an incredible indoor season so far. She also ran 7:13, so she's number 2 in the NCAA in the 60. And she's going into the SEC championships in a couple weeks with a solid 1-2 punch, both number 1 in the 60 and in the 200. So I'm curious to see what else she does later in this season. Um, I'm not going to, write off anyone else in the field, but I think it's fair for us to acknowledge just how special of a season Adaejah Hodge is so far having, especially since this is a comeback. And now moving on to the 60 hurdles, we're going to go to Kentucky and we're going to talk about Emmi Scales of Kentucky. She's been the leader in the clubhouse of the 60 hurdles for majority of the season. Well, this past weekend, she took it to a new level. Going up against Christina Clemens, formerly of Ohio State, an Olympian, she clocked a 7.83 in the 60 hurdles. That is no slouch time. 7.83 is amongst the 10 fastest times in NCAA history. And I think we found our newest hurdle star. Ironically, another Kentucky athlete. I mean, we can't forget there's athletes like Masai Russell, then there's Jasmine Camacho Quinn, Kendra Harrison. They've had a bevy of really good hurdlers over the years, and she's just the next one. 7.83 is impressive, and I think she may even, dip under 7.8. It remains to be seen, but she certainly can do it. Right now, she's got a clear lead on the field because there's a number of athletes who now have dipped under 8 seconds. Aaliyah McCormick of Oregon this past weekend ran a 7.95. You have Yanla of UCLA running 7.96. Several other athletes are capable of running 7.93 or 7.98 because they've done it before. But no one in the field has a sub 7.9 but her. And I think she's also the only one in the field that can probably run sub 7.8. So I think it's fair to say that Emmi Scales rightfully deserves the title of favorite as we head into the postseason. Now, moving to the 4x4, we talked about Georgia, but we can't talk about a team that has really dominated recently, and that is Arkansas. The Arkansas women clocked 325.82 this weekend. It was their best performance as a collective, probably their biggest win. It's a new U.S. number one. It wasn't against Georgia's A squad, so it remains to be seen what happens. But Georgia was not at the Tyson Invitational. Georgia was at the Tiger Paw meet at Clemson, which had a bevy of top performances, one of which was Emmi Scales. But Arkansas's 4x4, 325.82 on their home track, and they have a room to improve upon that. I thought they could have ran a 325 low or 324 high if pushed. So, do I think they're going to take over as favorite from Georgia? No, because Georgia beat them already. But I think it's fair to say that the big three, which have been Georgia, Arkansas, and South Carolina, are pulling away from the rest of the NCAA, and the only two schools that seem to have the depth and the quality time to compete with them, at least based on what I've seen, is Florida and Tennessee. Florida and Tennessee look really strong. Florida's 328 this weekend based off a strong anchor from Sydney Sutton. And they're very young. I believe Florida has three freshmen on their 4x4. So either three or two, but either way, that's insane. Florida's going to be a problem in the future when it comes to the women's 4x4. They're going to start to close that gap between them and Georgia and Arkansas, which some of the coaching changes that took place last year was, intended to do. A couple years ago, when Florida finished second in an indoor meet or in an outdoor meet, you could see the dissatisfaction in Coach Holloway's face because he had no 4x4. He had no sprints threat on the women's side. And you need that. Looking at Arkansas's 325.82, their ability to, put up top tier performances every year, at least for the past 5 or 6 years, you can't ignore that. And it's very impressive. And it's one of the reasons why they're always ranked high. Now, moving to the men's side, we're going to get right into the distance events, and we're going to talk about Marco Langen. And I'm happy to talk about him again on this channel because every time he's brought up, I believe this is the third time, it's always a great performance by him. He took the NCAA lead in the 3K, and Marco Langen of Villanova, 734 even. Great performance, great time against a strong field. The Valentine Invitational at Boston University, which has really become one of the preeminent distance tracks. Every single time they host a meet, there's a great distance time. Every single time. If you looked at this year, many of the programs are sending their athletes to that track. If not, it's to University of Washington's track. But whatever Boston's got going on, we need to see more of it. 734 for the Villanova athlete Marco Langen, and I expect for him to continue to remain a threat in this event. Yes, Hampton Samuel is there, but you can't ignore 734. And so I'm willing to put Marco Langen in that, you know, prediction of champion along with Hampton Samuel because we didn't see Hampton put up a time like that. So remains to be seen what happens as we head into the postseason in a couple weeks. But hats off to that young man, and I'm really, really delighted to talk about him. I hope to see him this year at the Penn Relays, doing another fantastic job, and maybe I'll get lucky and see him running an open event. And moving to the hurdles, as I talked on my channel, I want to say last week, and even on Reddit, Jacoby Tharp of Auburn is my favorite to win the NCAA title. And I think that he further proved that prediction. 746 for the Auburn athlete. And he did that in the semifinals. And, you know, he had a very busy weekend competing with Trey Cunningham, formerly of Florida State, who has gone top 10 all time running a 737. But Jacoby is going to be in that same lane. And he ran that 746 with great technique, but he didn't seem like he pressed the way I thought he would, which lets me know there's more in the tank. And I think we felt that. And he's going to need it because I do think this is a great 60 hurdle field. Jerome Campbell of Arkansas, who can run, who's got very good speed, he clocked a 748. And so he's number two, but you also can't forget the men at Texas Tech. So we're looking at a meet later on in the season where we're going to see probably 5 or 6 gentlemen running sub 7.5 in the 60 hurdles, but I think Jacoby Tharp will lead them. His 7.46 is the new NCAA lead, and Auburn track and field under coach Leroy Burrell is just leaping into a new level. Now moving on to the 4x4, which was ran at the same meet, the Tiger Paw meet, you have South Carolina. And South Carolina almost was the NCAA record holders. They dominated the field, even though Alabama's 4x4 had an anchor from Samuel Ogazi, who ran a 44.2 anchor. South Carolina ran 3 minutes, 0.86. That's 3.00.86. 3 minutes, 0.86 seconds. So not 3:08, 3 minutes, 0.86. Yes, they were that close to USC's NCAA record of 3.77. And I think they're probably going to break it. I think we're looking at the very first group that'll probably go sub 3 minute indoors, which is insane. The 400 and the 4x4 have completely changed over the years. And hats off to the coaching at South Carolina because the 4x4 in the SEC has kind of been dominated really between 4 schools: Florida, LSU, Arkansas, and at times, often the leader, Texas A&M. And this year, it looked like we were headed that way, but South Carolina, which held the lead for majority of the season, just put it even further out of reach because no one else is even under sub 302. Florida, you know, they ran the 302.15 to beat a really good Tennessee team, which ran 302.4. You have so many teams that are capable of running sub 303. It looks like in order to qualify for the meet, you need to be able to run 304 or better. But 3 minutes, 0.86 seconds for South Carolina with all 4 athletes running 45 seconds. And that's including the anchor and third leg, which had leads. Granted, it's indoors and it's still the 400, so you still got to run pretty tough to keep up. But I think we're all pretty confident in knowing that the future NCAA record holders, barring any injury, will probably be the South Carolina Gamecocks. In our final event we'll talk about today, we're going to go back to Georgia in the high jump. We're going to talk about Kimani Jack of Georgia. That young man is super talented. I remember he was a big time recruit for Georgia. And I actually thought he was going to go to Kansas State or Arkansas, but no, he chose Georgia. And things are going well with Coach Carol Smith Gilbert and the field athletes, but specifically in the high jump. You had Elena Kulichenko for years, who was very, very, very dominant, and nothing changed, you know, really. I mean, you have great programs at Arizona, Oklahoma, of course, Nebraska, which I will always say is probably the best field event school because they teach technique so well. We can't ignore what's going on at Georgia. This young man has jumped 7 feet 4.5, 2.25 meters. He's now tied at number one in the country. And he is an underclassman, so we need to get comfortable with seeing him. He's going to be around for a while, and he's going to be at the top for a while. He's part of the reason why the Georgia Bulldogs are thought of so highly and so favorably for an NCAA title. Okay, so I did miss one young lady, but think it's time that we talk about it. So it'll be the last event, so I apologize for misspeaking. But Anthonett Nabwe of Minnesota. And I'm happy to talk about a throwers, especially in this event, because she was not my prediction at the beginning of the season. And I ignored her performance from early December, and I still went with my prediction. And I even was bold enough to say in the preview that I felt that the person I predicted was not going to really receive any threats from the field. I think it was pretty much her event to win. I've been proven very wrong, as Anthonett Nabwe of Minnesota has owned the weight throw pretty much all year. She just recently launched a new number one throw, 80 feet 11 and a quarter inches, or 24.67 meters, which is insane. She's been over 80 feet a couple of times this season. And I think it's very clear that not only is she proven to be the new favorite, she's really the person who we need to say no competition. But I'm not going to say that because I've been proven wrong already. But what I am going to say is hello to the new favorite, Anthonett Nabwe of Minnesota. And again, another Big Ten thrower as the Big Ten leads it on both throws on the women's side. The shot put from Axelina Johansson of Nebraska, and now the weight throw of Anthonett Nabwe of Minnesota. And all right, well, that is the recap. I know that I owe you all a video based off of the rankings. I paused it because of the three major meets this weekend. You had the Valentine Invitational, you had the Tiger Ball at Clemson, and you had the Tyson Invitational at Arkansas. And I was really curious to see if the Husky Classic was going to be dialed down because it wasn't being billed as the same level as the other three, but it had a lot of top 10 performances. So the Husky Classic was also a big meet. And so I think with all the performances that took place, the rankings are going to shuffle. And so I want to talk about those rankings because we are headed into DMR weekend this coming weekend. So we'll see less individual performances. So what we saw this week is pretty much where most teams are kind of at. So we'll have a nice rankings video probably Wednesday, and we'll talk about what we see. So thank you so much for listening to my channel. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. As you clearly can see, I will reply back. I love engaging. Thank you always for your support, and I'll see you again in a couple of days.